VSLO here, and here's the first slide. What is VSLO? Who wants to take this one?
I can take this one. So what is VSLO? Like a lot of you guys, and I'm so sorry if you hear some music in the background. I'm like an hour away from home and I couldn't get home in time. But when I like started this whole process, I was like, what is this thing called? People call it VSLO, some people call it VSLO. Like, what is this thing? It's just a platform that you apply to away rotations on. So it's not just audition rotations. It's really you can use this platform to apply to any rotations that you do during your fourth year. It's just like Clinician Nexus. So if any of you guys have gone to any HCA hospitals or programs, it's just like that. So, whereas Clinician Nexus is only for HCA hospitals. The other thing to know about VSLO is that not all rotations or all programs post their rotations on VSLO. So, you might want to do an audition rotation somewhere and you don't see that they're on VSLO. That doesn't mean that they don't have a rotation at their location. It just means that they don't use VSLO for their application. So for all of the programs that you are interested in doing a rotation at, so for away rotations for PM&R, you want to make sure that you check the website of the program that you're wanting to do this at. They might have their own application on the website. There was even a program that I applied to last year that I reached out to the program coordinator, which is my next point, but they actually wanted me to do like an application of their own, which was on their website. And then if you got selected from that application, then they wanted you to apply on VSLO. So everybody has a very different way of going about this. It would make life way too simple for us if everybody followed the same process, which I would like for people to do, but they don't. So the most, the where you can find out the most information is just going to the program website. Emailing the program coordinator. So I have told all of my mentees this is something that really was helpful for me when I was applying for audition rotations. Is can is When you like look at your top programs and the places that you want to go, I would say pick like your top three programs and email the program coordinators. So like ask them, even if you see that they're on VSLO, you could email the program coordinator, say, I'm really interested in doing an away rotation at your institution. I saw that you're using VSLO as your platform for an application, and I see that it opens on this date. Is this correct? Just because I want to make sure that I get my application in on time. So even if you are seeing the date and you're seeing all the information, it just gets your face or your name in front of the program coordinator, and then they can email you back and be like, "Yep, that's our date," or I'm really looking forward to seeing your application come through. So that's why I would email out the program coordinators, or if you can't find a date, email them that way too. The way that you can find out more information is by Googling the program name, PM&R medical student rotation, or visiting students. So some of the programs like on on their website have it under their visiting students. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the following slides.
So we just wanted to touch on a little bit of the timeline. So obviously we're past January. So hopefully your schools have sent you the activation for your VSLO account. But really depends on what your school does on when you exactly get that. So now we're in the time of like it's really important to be looking at programs you're really interested in, figuring out why you're interested in those programs, and browsing them on these platforms like VSLO and saving them to further like look into them, see what their requirements are, things like that. Typically, sometime in March, programs will start kind of opening up their applications for you to apply to, but that is very program dependent. I had some that didn't open until close to May. So that's just something like, again, with that research and looking into those programs, hopefully you can find tentative dates and be able to kind of gauge on when that's going to happen and when they'll open. And then sometime late March, early April, programs might begin sending like acceptances for rotations as well. Just going off the rest of the timeline, of course, June, July, ideal time for boards, but that's a unique process for everyone. So, whatever your own timeline is, definitely follow that. And then typically, a lot of people will do auditions kind of in the fall to winter time. But again, very individualized. My last audition just ended like on Friday. So definitely can go later, can start earlier. It just depends on what you feel comfortable doing yourself and like what auditions you get. But and we'll talk about this, but it is very important to note that September-ish is when ARIS applications are due. And so we'll talk about this later, but it's probably good, especially in PM&R, to get at least one audition locked in prior to that for a slow. But again, we'll talk about that in more detail. And then, of course, November, December, January are really when heavy hitting interviews are happening. Um, and then just in terms of general information, it's really important to apply the day that they open. A lot of these programs really do first come, first serve methods. And so if you get your application on the top of their list, they'll look at it first and likely accept you. So that's really important. But at the same time, like Danielle already mentioned, emailing the program coordinator is also very clutch. They do a lot for the program, and so they have a lot of a sway, especially if you email them and tell them why you want to rotate there and what you'll learn from the program as well.
All right, so when you're applying for VSLO, you're going to be you need to include these kind of documents that we kind of have outlined. Each audition rotation or wherever you apply on VSLO, they're all going to have different things. But I think the ones that we have highlighted, I would say those are the most important parts. So I'm gonna kind of go with the highlighted ones first and then the rest. So a personal statement or a letter of interest, some of these rotations are going to ask you to do that. The way I kind of structured mine just to make them kind of easy and to the point was just a paragraph that kind of was like a personal connection, kind of talking about myself, why I wanted to do PM&R. A second paragraph kind of talking about things that I've already done in PM&R and just kind of like leadership positions that I wanted to highlight. And then the last one kind of saying why I wanted to go to this specific program and why I wanted to do this specific rotation, whether it was an outpatient rotation or an inpatient rotation. So I think that's an important thing to kind of already have started working on if possible. I would say though, the personal statement that you are writing for VSLO, it doesn't have to be the same one that you're going to send off for ERAS for your residency applications. So kind of just make this one obviously professional and kind of to the point compared to like the residency one. Secondly, the letter of recommendation. For me, I didn't think it was like you didn't need one that was specifically for PM&R. I honestly just asked my family medicine physician and I didn't even use his letter of recommendation on my ERAS. I think it's just important because some of these programs do ask for it. So just have somebody in the back pocket that you can always just be like, hey, can you upload this on my VSLO? And then lastly, the most important one would be the up-to-date CV. For all of these, I think they all want you to just include a CVs that they have so that they can see kind of what you've been doing. So make sure that's up to date. So then there's no confusion on stuff that you've done and or haven't done. And then some of the other stuff that I wanted to talk about, the AMC immunization forms. I know it's very school dependent of how they do it, but that's pretty much just, COVID shot, all your immunizations, all of that stuff. That's more of like a centralized thing. And then the way my school did it, they would like kind of sign the form at the end. So I didn't need to go to like my PCP or anything like that. And then we also included like the BLS cards. I'm pretty sure most rotations ask for that, so try to find that in your email. I had like a hard time finding that. I had to like scroll through all my deleted spam, everything to try to find those cards. Drug screen and background checks, again, those are very dependent on the rotation that you're applying to. So I wouldn't pay for anything ahead of time. And if you do need a background check, there's one that you can find online. It was $25. I'll try to find it at the end of the rotation, so then you don't have to pay for one that's like $300 because I know my school told me to do that, but I didn't. I just used the one that was cheaper. And then the letter of good standing or transcript, that's going to be your school sending that off. So on VSLO, there's going to be stuff that you upload and then that your school uploads. So some things you won't even need to upload. And then obviously a headshot. All of them are going to want to see a headshot just so they kind of have an idea what you look like. A little tidbit for that, JCPenney has a Groupon where you can get like headshots for like $30. So I think that was useful. You got a ball on a budget, so that's kind of what I did for that.
Okay, so this slide is about letters of recommendation, which are more strategic than people realize, I would say. Both PM&R and prelim or TY years allow up to 4 letters. So for prelim or TY years, try to have at least one FM or IM letter since those programs want to see that you can function well in like the general medicine setting. And then a quick clarification because I'm sure it's confusing to see what SLO is at this point. A traditional letter of recommendation is the narrative letter that we all are more familiar with. It's written more freely by a faculty member, which describes, anything that you could think would be in it. And then a SLO, on the other hand, is a standardized letter of evaluation, and it follows a structured template where faculty kind of rate you and define domains. And compare you directly to other students that they've worked with. So instead of saying, this student is the best student I've ever had, it might indicate where you fall relative to your peers, whether that's the top 10% or top third. And that standardization, according to them, helps them, compare applicants across institutions where things aren't as standardized. For PM&R now, most programs now strongly and require a SLO. SLOs were just added this year for PM&R, so y'all are lucky to not be the guinea pigs anymore. So you'll have some at least data on how they've worked this year. And I guess as the years go on, programs will get better at knowing how to interpret them. And remember, one of the biggest reasons for doing an away rotation is not just to explore a program or show interest in them, but it's to earn that SLO or letter of rec before the ERAS deadline. So take that into consideration when you're trying to plan, those July, August, September rotations, because that letter can definitely carry a lot of weight. For example, I had 2 PM&R SLOs and 1 additional PM&R letter of rec, and then 1 internal medicine letter. And I submitted all of those to every program that I applied to. And yeah, so when you're planning rotation, just be intentional because you'll be needing those things in the long run.
Okay, so when I started applying to programs on VSLO, some people are like, yeah, you can, start your personal statement. There's a lot more programs that want a personal statement in PM&R than I had anticipated. I think almost all of the programs that I applied to wanted a personal statement. So it is a good idea to get started on that. It can read more like a letter of intent. I personally did mine more of like a personal statement. You want to make like a general skeleton and then add program specific. So, um, one of my biggest questions when I was doing this process was like, how is this different than the one that I'm going to use for ERAS? And everybody kept saying like, oh, it's just like, a really, really rough draft of your personal statement that you're going to use for ERAS, which didn't really help me all that much. So I think using this example skeleton will help. And then as you get closer to ERAS, you can see if you want to change it. I know I use the Writing Center at our school, and that really helped me. One thing that she had recommended that I really change about my personal statement is that when I start doing away rotations, that I use examples of patient interactions and my experiences on those rotations, and modify my personal statement for ERAS in that way, which I think worked out really well for me. But the first paragraph is just introducing who you are. This is where you can like even put in a little sentence about why you're, specifically the program that you're interested in. So I'm writing to express interest in so-and-so's program. And then your second and third paragraphs really should be like why PM&R and why you in PM&R. And this can be like we're saying a mini personal statement of sorts. And then your fourth paragraph is where you want to get program specific. So this paragraph can really be the skeleton, pretty broad, besides like a couple sentences where you put in specific things that are specific to the program. So when you are making your multiple personal statements, all you have to do is change those couple sentences to fit the program that you're applying for. And this is where you also get the chance to learn more about the program. So you're going to be digging on those websites, figuring out like why you actually want to rotate at these specific programs. And so if somebody asks you, you should be able to say like, why are you interested in this program? And that's, the things that you're going to put in that fourth paragraph. So I think that was for me the biggest thing of like trying to figure out how is this different than ERAS. Another thing that when I applied on ERAS, because there's only 20 signal, or there's now 20 signals, everybody was telling me that I asked that the specific things about the program in your actual personal statement on ERAS are not as important because you are using your signal to tell them that you are very interested. So like putting in the program specific reasons in your personal statement isn't as important because you're going to be signaling that place, if that makes sense.
All right, so we're just gonna do a quick crash course into kind of what VSLO looks like. I'm sure you guys have had a chance a little bit to go into that. So on your left, obviously you can see all the filters. I feel like the filters were probably the most important part and kind of made the process super easy. Um, I mostly just used the specialty filter. So I made sure that it was only physical medicine and rehab. And then for duration of elective, I think I sometimes just made like 4 weeks or 2 weeks, depending on what I wanted. Um, Make sure that when you do have your kind of specialty filter, or like when you are looking onto these PM&R auditions, electives, whatever, that you don't select a neurology elective. Sometimes PM&R and neurology on VSLO kind of get combined together. So I think for this page, I mean, this is pretty much what it looks like on VSLO. Like you would press the save button, and then when you press the save button, that will kind of transfer it over to your saved electives. And then I think we may have touched on this a little bit, but when you save a program and and they open up the spots, they will send you an email that the applications are open. So I think we can go to the next slide. So here's kind of what it looks like when you are applying for these rotations. So the application requirements, as you all can see, they'll say like the supplemental documents, the personal statement, like we talked about, the CV. And then when you press on that, it's like a hyperlink and you personally upload your document. And then on VSLO, there's like a document section where you can upload those ahead of time. So then it just kind of makes the application process a little bit easier. And then again, there's going to be the dates offered. They usually have multiple dates. So when you are applying, just the way I kind of did it, I applied for multiple dates for one rotation because that's 15 bucks, multiple dates. So I think that just kind of increases your chances. So then you don't have to apply for, different rotations within one system. And yeah, that's pretty much it. They'll have like the goals, comments, descriptions. So that's kind of more program specific of what they write in there. And then this one is just kind of if you want to see what the program charges or like what specific requirements they have and their important dates. I will point out that some programs will charge DO students a little bit more. And then here you can kind of see if they do that. That's just part of the process. I would say most of them, I think, charge the same, but there was a couple I saw that charged you a little bit more for being a DO student. And I think that's kind of pretty much it for this page as well. Danielle, I think you wanted to do this one.
That's okay. We can just go to the next person. I didn't know how we were counting the slides.
Okay. Sure. I guess I'll continue because I'm unmuted. But again, so pearls that we kind of wanted to talk about, and I think so. I'll just kind of start off with the money since I was talking about it. So each application costs $15. So that $15 is you can add multiple dates for one program, and that will be $15. But if you want to apply for multiple rotations within that program. Let's say that program has three rotations. They have an inpatient spinal cord injury, inpatient TBI, and then an outpatient. If you want to apply for all of those, that's going to be $15 for each. But if you apply just for the inpatient rehab for spinal cord and you add multiple dates, that will be all just $15. And then I think it's also super important on all these rotations to consider cost of living. I think that's something I kind of undermined a little bit. And then when I started, getting rotations in like New York and places where I'm not from, I was like, all right, this is crazy. I can't afford like a $3,000 apartment for 1 month. So you got to really tap into your network and you might be couch surfing. Like I was on my cousin's couch for 4 weeks when I was in New York. I know some friends were in hotels. So just make sure that you kind of look into that, food, transportation. And then Airbnbs are expensive. So if you can find somebody you could stay with, I think that would be probably the best choice. And again, like I mentioned, specialized rotations, you will see that on the course. So when you are doing these specialized rotations, it's also kind of it's nice because sometimes you get to work with the one attending. Like when I was on a spinal cord rotation, I worked 4 weeks with just one attending. It was a little bit after ERAS, so I didn't need a letter of recommendation. But if I needed one, I think that's like a awesome opportunity. So sometimes you do get to work with only one attending on these specialized rotations. And then kind of how the ranking works when you're doing it on VSLO. When you add those multiple dates, like I mentioned, and you're about to pay, they will kind of just have you like move the dates of what you want to do first. So it'll just kind of give you preferences on dates that you would rather do. It doesn't really change how they look at your application, it's just your own preference. And then another pearl that I think is important, and I'm sure everyone here would agree, apply broadly. Obviously, don't apply like so broad that it's gonna cost you like $10,000 to go somewhere. But I feel like apply broadly enough where you're not kind of limiting yourself. Like I did a rotation in New York, I did a rotation in North Jersey, then I went back to Maryland where I'm from. So I think kind of utilizing that network again, like I said, like if you know somebody, you have a friend in New York, and there's a ton of New York programs that are cool, and you're interested in them, I would definitely kind of fish that, try to apply broadly and see what you can get from that.
I just wanted to add one more thing, just in terms of pearls. I think it's important to know that when you apply to these multiple dates, and especially if you apply to like outpatient and inpatient, there will be a drop down arrow that or on your application that says how many months you want to spend at that program. And so you can select one, meaning like an if or situation. So like if you get an outpatient rotation, you're only doing the month of outpatient and you're not also going to do a month of inpatient at that same program. So that's just another little tidbit that I thought of. And then I also want to say it's important to withdraw from programs and from dates as you go. So just like when I would get an offer for a month before I would do anything, before I would email them and accept them, I would go on VSLO and withdraw myself from the dates that would overlap that. That way you don't have to run into the awkward canceling or declining situation. It kind of saves you a little bit, especially if you can withdraw. Um, and that's just on VSLO. It literally just takes that application out of their system and they never know it happened. And so it's a little bit nice in that regard. So you don't have to email them and cancel or decline something. So, all right, now we can talk about the other pearls.
Sorry,
Um,
I also just want to add something, Sarah.
yeah, go ahead.
So I didn't know this either until after I started applying to rotations, but when you put your like date preferences, you can't go back and look at those preferences. So like I took a screenshot of the date preferences that I had and I saved it because once you start applying to like multiple rotations, kind of forget the dates that you had in order and what dates overlap, etc. So before you hit submit with the $15, I would take a screenshot of the order of dates that you had for each rotation. Okay, now we can move on.
Yes, and I did that too, so that's a great point. So yeah, ultimately, it's great to save the programs that you're interested in, and you theoretically should get an email. That being said, I did have a program that released their applications and they didn't email me. And whether that was user error, probably, but it's just safer to, in general, check on VSLO at least every day or every other day. Again, you want to be the first in line when you have that application, especially if it's one of your top programs. And so it's easier just to check. Sometimes I would check twice a day when it was like the heavy part of the season where a lot of programs were releasing. Um, and having all required documents ready. So, like Dan said, there is a section on VSLO that you can save documents. So you can pre-write those personal statements, have everything, have the immunization form. My school also just had some fourth year coordinators sign it for us. But having that ready so you don't have to like go and, call your school in panic. It's just there, it's already submitted. That makes it a lot easier so that when it does open, say you're in clinic, you can just step out for 5 minutes and just, add to cart, the different documents and kind of submit them, and it makes the process a little more smooth. Um, and then Yeah, so my school didn't really have trouble with affiliation agreements, so I can't really speak on that too much. I don't know if you guys did. But yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was just gonna add real quick. Like, my school had a problem with an affiliation agreement. Nobody told me ahead of time, so I paid the $15 and then got rejected 5 minutes in. And I was like, oh my God, like that's the worst thing ever. They rejected me. But then, like, I emailed the school and they just told me, oh yeah, you shouldn't have applied to this. We don't have an affiliation agreement. So honestly, take that what you will. Maybe email your school ahead of time. I don't know. You just kind of have to. It's a lottery sometimes.
I will say my school requires so we have a standard form that on clinical rotations they complete about us, like did Sarah do well clinically? Did she have good differentials? Whatever. That form my school requires them to fill out, and there was one school that does not fill that out, and they only do their form. And my school had to say, okay, we will accept their form. So that possibly could have been a hang up, but luckily for me, it was okay because that one program, like, we accepted their form. Okay. Otherwise, VSLO is not just for auditions. Fun fact, it's actually for any rotation you want to do that's not necessarily with your school and your program. So, you can do, if your school allows it, a virtual rotation. Um, and apply for those. Those happen on VSLO as well. And then, anything else. If you just want to like go home, you can apply for an away in, something there. And if they accept you, you can just go home if you don't live at home. And so you do have to be mindful, though, and that kind of goes on to the next slide a little bit. You have to be mindful about what the title is when you're applying. If it says something like AI, acting internship, something that feels official, it probably is an actual audition. So if you apply for like I am AI at a program, that's probably going to feel like an audition versus if you just apply for a general like wilderness medicine rotation like Dan says. That probably will be a more fun laid back rotation, so I would definitely pay attention. And that also kind of talks about this slide in the way that not every rotation, even in PM&R, is a quote true audition. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't like give you a leg up at that program, but like a lot of true auditions are like inpatient. And so it'll say AI acting internship, something to that effect. And that's what a true audition is. They might have also like an outpatient interventional spine rotation that you can do, but it's possible that you're just rotating with someone within their program and they don't necessarily evaluate you in the same way. So, that being said, it doesn't mean one of my rotations was an outpatient rotation. So, technically not a true audition, but I spent a whole week with the PD and another week with the APD. So, it was more of like an audition than anything else I probably did. Um, but technically, it wasn't an audition. So, whether that means something is really program dependent, but I just wanted to throw that tidbit in there because I probably didn't know that initially. So just knowledge is power is what I wanted to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, I know someone who did like a virtual ENT rotation where all they had to do was submit how many steps they were walking every day for 4 weeks. So highly recommend that one. I think it was at UTMB. If y'all want to do that, I think you can do it from anywhere, of course, because it's virtual. But anyway, let's see. So this next slide is about picking programs. I think this part can feel overwhelming really quickly, and going off what Dan said about where to apply. First, you kind of need to get clear on your priorities, and I think that's personal to everyone. For some people, location is everything. Being near family, a partner, or in a specific city matters the most. But for others, maybe the name of the program or their fellowship matches and things like that. And I think interest is another big one. What kind of, just thinking about like what kind of physiatrist do you want to be? Are you drawn to like peds, SCI, TBI, sports, ETC? And I think different programs have different strengths, and you should be intentional about aligning your training or like aligning the rotation with what excites you, so you don't have to be dragging yourself about going into a peds rotation that you don't want to go into. But that's neither here nor there. I think connections matter too. If you have mentors at a program, prior rotations there, strong, geographic ties, that can also influence both your experience and your application strength, and then maybe ultimately the letter you get from them. And I think something else that's really important is you might not actually know whether you're a fit into a program until you're physically there. Website, social media, and even interviews only tell you so much. So I think the culture, the resident dynamic, and how you feel day to day, it's hard to gauge until you can experience it in person. I think that's the downfall to virtual rotation, I mean, virtual interviews. But other than that, definitely considering, travel budget, housing budget. Dan had mentioned he had tried to focus on places where he had family or friends to stay with, and then also also looking into past residents who had gotten in there. Like some programs, unfortunately only have taken MDs forever, and it might not be worth your time to go to a program like that. Obviously, people have broken glass ceilings in every area, and I don't want to discourage anyone from, putting themselves out there, but just talk to people if you know them at specific programs and, try to get an idea of what you might experience. And I think another thing I wanted to add was that it's also completely okay if you do an away rotation, that rotation does not end up being your top choice for residency. I think sometimes you go in thinking it's your dream program, and once you're there, you realize you're not the right fit. And then other times, a place might surprise you in the best way. So I think that's a huge advantage to these rotations. Um, but yeah, I think being honest with yourself about, whether you realistically see yourself there, whether you have ties there, have students from your school match there is another good thing to think about. But yeah, at the end of the day, this process is both personal and practical. You're choosing where you'll spend a month of your time. So, align your priorities and definitely keep an open mind and allow yourself to adjust as you learn more.
Yeah, I couldn't echo what Rhoda is saying like more than her saying it, but like just remember that when you do these away rotations, like this is your chance, like of course the program is seeing how well you fit with their program, but also you are seeing how well they fit with you. And so really use that time to like it's just as great an experience if you walk out of that 4 weeks or 2 weeks and be like, nope, this isn't really the program for me, or I didn't like feel the vibes. Like that's equally just as much information you get from that as if you were at a rotation, you're like, I really, really like this place. Um, so how to find program information. I think we kind of touched on this, but we can just briefly go through it again. So it is important to note that the rotations usually go through the medical school, not the specific residency program. So you might be talking to people through email or like onboarding or whatever that are not like specifically in the PM&R department. And I think it's just helpful to know that because then you get into the program, like might not meet the person you were communicating with via email. And just like asking your questions to like maybe the program coordinator isn't the best person to be asking once you get to like the onboarding step and stuff like that. And also when you're going on the websites, if you're searching for more information about the rotations, then knowing that it's under the medical school and not necessarily the residency program is helpful. Um, so looking at student resources like under the visiting students or looking even under the medical student education, graduate student education. Again, that visiting students is like a really key word that you want to type into Google. And then you can also look outside of VSLO about the programs in general on Frida, Doximity, AAMC, Texas Star. I would say those are really good resources to just seeing like if that's a program that you're interested in applying to in general, and then if you want to do an away there. Um, and Dan said, I would say the program coordinators are the best people to try and contact with any questions or concerns in the program. Yes, I would say that's absolutely true. Just like I had mentioned, just know that once you like start onboarding and stuff, it might not be the program coordinator that you're communicating with.
And I think this is just an example of a program organizer. I don't know who made this one, but it wasn't me, but it gives you an idea of how detailed you can get. I definitely recommend creating some sort of spreadsheet or organization once interviews start, programs kind of really begin to blur together. So you can track the basics like this, like location, advanced versus categorical, and everything like that. Some people also track lifestyle factors, as you can see here, like PTO, housing costs, allowances. And those details become really important when you're a year from now. So yeah.
So, thank you guys for presenting. There was wonderful tidbits in there that, being a fourth year student really, put you guys in the right position to tell us what to do, something that our schools probably wouldn't tell us. And I'm sure everyone in this chat, in this message group, all appreciate that. And thank you guys. So, here are a few submitted questions first that were written up here that were submitted on the sign up sheet. And then after that, I'll like look into the chat. And if anybody has any other questions, you can throw them in the chat and then I'll read them off. Okay. And whoever feels comfortable answering each one, do your best. Thanks.
I can answer the first one.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. That I mean, it's probably program dependent. Not I didn't take step. I did not take step one, not step two. I didn't feel like it limited me in not only auditions, but also in interviews. But that was my personal choice. That was my preference. I'm not saying that that's, everyone's individual. Probably some of the people here took step. But that being said, they normally for DOs will require a COMLEX score to be submitted, but only COMLEX one. Have it feels like a lifetime ago, but most problems or programs would not require STEP. That would, I think, be more of an ERAS like true application thing, rather than just an audition.
And I also think a lot of them say they require step one on the website, and they actually don't. Um, so level one definitely suffices.
Okay. And now, how many auditions should the average person apply to, and how many acceptances do you get out of those auditions that you apply to?
I actually like looked up, I opened up my like Google Sheet where I was like, I wrote all the programs I applied to just so I can make sure I gave an honest answer. I think I applied to 15 rotations and so I did three through VSLO, one wasn't through VSLO, and then I think I got two more offers that I ended up declining just because of dates. I don't think there's like a magic number of how many to apply to. I think from what I've heard in the past was like multiplied by like if you want four of rotations, like multiplied by two or three just to make sure. I don't know. That's like I've heard that formula before. I also don't think you need to apply to like more than like 10, 15. I think that's like way overdoing it and like a lot of money. So I think also it really again depends on what your factors are. If location is really big for you and you're only applying to like I don't know, like let's say if you're in the Philly program, you're only applying like Philly and New Jersey, then there's not going to be that many programs to apply for. So again, it's really dependent on what you like what preferences that you have. And then also to add to what Sarah and Rhoda were saying, I also didn't take step one, like full transparency, didn't take step one, step two. I don't think it hindered me in any way. And then, like Rhoda said, on some of the websites, they do say that. And then when you are on the rotation, I always just ask, like I would, if the program director or the APD, I'd be like, hey, what are your thoughts on like somebody if they didn't take step one? And I had a program director straight up tell me like I really don't care. I just want to make sure that your score is like somewhat like normal and not like fully in the dumps, you know? So just to kind of ease that stress of regarding step one.
Great. And then the next question about withdrawals, Dan, you talked about that a little bit earlier, so I think I can skip that one. And then like this one, if you're double booked or something happens where you have to turn down, how do you turn it down nicely?
You go, bro. I don't wanna.
Okay, yeah. I had to turn down two of them after I had, agreed and actually had it on my calendar and everything because two of the other ones I wanted to do more. And I think one, you're communicating a lot of the time with admin people and program coordinators, so they don't actually like the faculty don't really know whether you were going to come or not. What I mean, unless you told them. But the other thing is that I think they're most people are pretty understanding that we have a lot of our schedules are out of our control, and actually the two places that I turned in, I still got interviews at, so it ended up being okay.
Thanks, Rhoda. That's great information. That's something I was worried about as, these applications keep coming in and applying. I know we talked about housing a little bit earlier, but other than like friends and family, were there any other times you guys did interesting, unique ways to find cheap housing?
I
I,
did not.
oh, so good.
It, sorry, I was just gonna say I traveled with my dog, so we balled out and got Airbnbs. Unfortunately, it just was the way to be able to travel with my dog safely.
I will say there's two rotations that just from like AOCPMR conferences and connecting with people, I knew some residents at a couple of the programs that I rotated at that I stayed with, but just as like a little pearl on that, like that could be either a really good thing to do or it could be like a not so good thing to do. So if you don't know the resident very well, then you're kind of taking a risk of like you're living with somebody for a certain amount of time and they're like the ears and eyes of the program. But then again, if like you're really good friends with one of the residents, like that could be really helpful for you. So I would just kind of, make sure that you know the pros and cons to that.
And then did you guys do any 2 week rotations? I see most of them are 4 weeks. Did you guys do any two?
I did
Dan and
one too.
sorry, yeah. Dan and I actually did a 2 week rotation, or I did a 2 week rotation while he was doing a 4 week there, actually. So I did do a 2 week rotation.
And how were the 2 week rotations? How did they were they different than 4 week rotations? Did you get the same impact?
I feel like, yeah, I did definitely get the same impact, and I honestly felt like it was a perfect amount of time.
Yeah, I would echo that too. I think that they are equally as good, if not, like, I wouldn't say they're any less than a 4-week rotation.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. All right, so now I'm gonna stop the share and then move over to the chat to see what's been going on there this whole time. Again, thank you all for answering all those questions. Those amazing responses.
There
Okay.
is a question in the chat that I feel like we maybe should talk about a little bit more,
Mhm.
and that's how many ways would you recommend for someone? So I really hate the answer that I'm about to tell you, but this is such a personal like choice. So obviously we are all here because we did a lot of aways. However, like Dan said, I think for PM&R you have to do at least one, especially trying to secure that slow this year. Um, but this all depends on you as an applicant. And so, you know, are you outgoing? Can you be on for a whole month? Like, those are really important things to consider. And that's not a bad thing if the answer is no. It just maybe means you don't need to go be on, you know, actively kind of interviewing for a whole month for four months or more. Um, but are you not as strong on paper? Maybe then you would want to do more. So people see how good of a worker you are and how amazing you are, in person. So, if you don't have as amazing of test scores, maybe you do more rotations, to get your name and your face out there. So I really hate that I said, I'm not giving you a number or an answer, but I do think it's just such a personal choice, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that too. But that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I would say that if you know for a fact you're going to go fully into PM&R, I would do at least two. I think just because of how PM&R is, there's inpatient, there's outpatient, there's spinal cord, there's TBI. I think it also kind of helps you doing those multiple rotations because on interviews, you can kind of connect on a deeper level as an applicant. Like if somebody asks you like kind of what your interests are, I always said I have an open mind, but I also did also mention that I know I want to do more procedural stuff just from what I've seen on rotations as well. I personally did 4 rotations and I thought that was the best number ever. More than four, I feel like your brain is just mush. You're done. You're doing interviews in between because you don't want to miss too much time on your rotations as well. So I thought four was just the absolute best number. And then I also want you guys to think of it like honestly, this whole process is kind of like dating. Like you're going on all these rotations, you're trying to see, hey, do I vibe with these people? Do I vibe with the PD? Do I like driving 45 minutes to another rotation spot? Because that's what residents have to do in some programs, you know? The more questions you ask while on these rotations, kind of keep that in mind. And the more rotations you do, you'll see how different programs operate. You know, some programs are very procedural. Some programs, there's not a lot of procedural aspects. Some programs are very inpatient heavy, some are not. Some programs didactic schedule is like you're taking boards every day. Some, so it's so program dependent. And I think I would say the best number is four if you can afford it, because if you're doing Airbnbs or you can't find housing, it costs a ton, obviously. And I know we didn't mention this, but some rotations actually do give a scholarship if you kind of meet some of the requirements. I know there's like a specific like minority scholarships and then some other aspects. I kind of found out about that too late, like once I already scheduled all my rotations. So I would make sure you also look into that because some of them do give you like I think a $2,000, $3,000, like they call it stipend. So that's also super helpful.
Yeah, I've actually taken a different outlook on that. I think four was too much for me personally. I think I would have done two to three maximum. I just became really exhausted. Maybe I'm just extremely lazy, and that's likely the case. But if you have a lot of energy and can kind of like show up every day and um, be there and just be present. I think it's a great idea to do as many as you possibly can. But don't feel bad if you're like someone that's like, oh, I just want to do like two or three. I think that's also appropriate. Another thing that I wanted to add, because we weren't able to get to the question on the other slide, was how can you kind of stand out on an addition rotation? Um, I think a lot like when I was going into it, I felt like I needed to kind of like know a lot about PM&R and know a lot about, the pathologies I was seeing. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, they know that, a lot of med schools do not teach about PM&R. Or I think my first rotation was spinal cord injury and I had no clue anything about it. It's very complex, and residents don't even know about it until they do it. So I think don't worry too much about knowing a lot of the information, but I think it's a lot about effort, acting like you want to be there even when you don't. Doing the little things that the residents need help with. Calling insurance companies, calling anyone, just being as helpful as possible, and don't take yourself too seriously. You definitely have to be really humble in these situations, like, oh, I'm a med student, I shouldn't have to be grabbing something for a patient, but you have to take yourself out of it and just show up in every way possible.
I
Yeah,
definitely. Oh, go ahead, Danielle.
sorry, I was just gonna chime in on how many rotations I did. So I like Dan and Rhoda, obviously they both did four, and they were one really thought that was the perfect number and the other one didn't. So as everybody is saying, like it's really knowing yourself and like what you're capable of and what you want to do too. But I think like for me, I did 4.5, I would say, because I did four and then a 1 2 week rotation. I think for me, it was super helpful to do that many because a lot of people had told me before I started applying to programs on ERAS, like, know what you're looking for in a program. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, how do I know what I'm looking for in a program? And I think by doing multiple rotations, you start to understand what that means by what you're looking for in a program. And then when it comes to applying on ERAS, you can compare your experiences that you had on away rotations and kind of like dwindling down what things are important to you. Um, and sticking out on a rotation as well. Again, echo what Rhoda said. In addition, I just want to say, like, don't be too eager either. Like, you should be helpful. You should, be participating, be interested. But most of the time, you're going to be with PGY2s. And so, PGY2s are like, especially in these months that you're going to be auditioning, they are just like getting the ropes of inpatient and they are like very overwhelmed. And so, also kind of just like taking a step back and doing whatever you can do for them without being like, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? Like, they are also trying to like figure out what they need to do. So sometimes that can also just be helpful, just like taking a step back and like looking around and being and like thinking to yourself, what can I do for this person?
So, just to kind of echo what other people are saying, I did four, as I mentioned. And initially, I was like, this feels like a lot. But now that I've finished my fourth rotation and I'm staring at my rank list in the face and it is overwhelming, one of my programs that I really like, I actually didn't rotate there, and I'm kind of, sad because I didn't get to see it in person. And so comparing that to a program that you did see in person is really hard. And so that being said, I'm glad that I did four. It was a lot, but now that it's over, I do feel like that was the right number for me personally, because it gives me a lot more insight about some of my favorite programs and, what that means for me. That being said, too, definitely want to echo what everyone else said about how to stand out. I think on my last rotation, I got the best compliment I've ever had in my entire life. One of my residents said, "You are the least annoying medical student that I've ever experienced." And I think, as funny and as, goofy as that is, he was being serious. And that honestly is an honor because that's what you strive to be. You want to show up, you want to be paying attention, show up early, kind of review the list and just like pay attention to things, like if it's not your patient, but like maybe we're in rounds, we're talking about someone's like, you know, checking their labs, right? One thing you can do, like while your resident is like off and, writing all their notes and putting all their orders in, like you could maybe check on some of those things just to see. And don't be like, Danielle said, don't be too eager, don't be too like aggressive about it, but like, if it comes up in conversation, be like, oh yeah, I looked at that, radiology read and it actually, said this, or like bringing it up before they have to go hunt for it, I felt like was something that I did that was valuable. So being an asset and like Danielle said too, like not creating more issues for them. So, being there, being present, like, showing that you're there, but showing that you're there by just like kind of paying attention and being there to learn and grow as a student and a future physiatrist would be the advice I would say.
All right, and thank you for those answers. Those are great answers. So we started in the chat here. We started talking about a little bit more about advanced versus categorical, transitional, prelim, those type of words. So if you guys could just give some information about pros and cons of advanced versus categorical programs and what you guys are kind of planning to do.
Yeah, I can go ahead start us off. So, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, categorical, you're basically at that program for 4 years. So you'll do like a medicine year with that program. And then advanced, it's basically just three PM&R years, and then you have to find a TY or a prelim beforehand. So I pretty much applied pretty broadly. I would say I put more emphasis on prelim programs just because I wanted to have more of like a I guess like a medicine head, like going in before going into like an inpatient realm. TYs, I would say it really depends on the program. Some of them are a little bit more chill. Some of them are actually more intensive than prelim years. So it again, it's really dependent on kind of what you're looking for. So like one of the programs I applied, like one PM&R program that is like on my list is like Hopkins. They're an advanced program, so I try to find like prelims and TYs that are in Maryland, so then I don't have to move too much. So I think that's kind of how I strategized it as well. So like depending where I thought I would get interviews, or like once I did get interviews from everywhere, like now rank wise, I'm trying to strategize where there's gonna be less moving if that's even possible. So I'm personally like ranking up like categorical programs higher just because I feel like those programs kind of align more with me, what I want. And then also being at one program for 4 years, I feel like that's a very nice advantage to have because you kind of already know how they work, like the whole hospital system, how it works. So you don't have to like feel like a new person when you start kind of like your PGY 2 year.
All right, thank you, Dan, for that. Oh, Sarah, did you have something to say? It's getting close to 8 o'clock, and I just want to be respectful for everyone's time.
Yeah, I mean, I could just add my 2 cents.
Yeah.
I basically agree with Dan. I have a dog. My dog does not like change, so categorical programs are going to be a little bit more important for me, just in terms of moving once, hopefully. But that being said, I did apply to more TY years, just kind of location based and stuff. I think in hindsight, I should have applied to more prelim years, and I think that's something that I would probably do. Like if I redid it, I would apply to more prelim years than I did, um, and have more opportunities. Um, but that being said, I value categorical more, but that's again a personal decision. And then yes, you apply to PM&R and TY and prelim. All of those are separate things. So that's getting into the minutia a little bit, and I'm sure down the road there hopefully would be a Zoom about specifically how to apply, because that's kind of a detailed answer, but they're all separate applications.
Okay. Thank you all to all of our panelists for attending tonight. I really appreciate it. And I know how VSLO and residency get kind of trapped into one when having this conversation. So we did a good job keeping it apart tonight. So before we end it all, do you guys have any last piece of advice before you guys head out?
I was just gonna say, like, I know this process is scary. You know, it's there's a lot of unknown. The timeline feels kind of crazy. I would say, like, apart from like trying to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and all that, I think the most important thing is trying to stay organized because once you start getting those emails, once you start getting accepted everywhere, you know, you start looking at dates where it'll be like, oh, September 22nd to this October, and you're like, oh, I don't have a rotation then. Then you look, open up your calendar, and you're like, oh, I actually do have a rotation, so I need to decline or ask them if I can change that. So I think organization is really key to this process. And I think honestly, just have fun with it. I think audition rotations after doing this whole crazy process, it was honestly so fun. You get to learn how different programs operate. You get to meet a ton of cool people. Like I met a ton of residents that I have their numbers. Like we talk here and there, and I got to ask them questions. I got to live in, you know, New York City when I didn't think that was going to happen on my fourth year. So, you know, you get to do stuff that you didn't think that was going to happen. And it's a fun time. I know it seems stressful, but like try to take it day by day. I think that's the easiest or like the advice I would kind of give to everyone.
Yeah, in terms of organization, just for my own the way I did it, I don't know if it'll show it, but in Notes app, I literally wrote out every single date, little crazy. So when I booked a rotation, I would just put that in there and it would block out that date in my Notes app, just so I knew where I was, what I was doing. But that being said, yeah, have fun. These rotations are meant to learn about PM&R. It's meant to talk to people. It's to get excited about the field that, hopefully you're doing for your future. And so have a lot of fun, take it one day at a time. This is a very stressful process, but I promise, like, once you get your first acceptance to an interview, things get a little lighter and it gets easier and it's kind of like second nature. So it's really scary right now, but it'll get better. And then you'll be doing the rotations and having so much fun doing it. So good luck, everyone. I hope this was helpful.
Thanks everyone for coming. And thanks our fourth years for having this wonderful presentation. And good luck on match day. Hoping for the best.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
All right, bye everyone.
All right, see you guys.